Good evening, everyone. We left off on page 123. Kerry and Greg walked into Benito's restaurant, a small diner-like place off of Locust Street in downtown Chicago. They sat down at the bar in the front and watched as a man in the far corner pulled out a cigarette. It was illegal, true, but they weren't here to stop people from smoking in public places. "Excuse me," Greg said, getting the waitress's attention. "What can I get for you, handsome?" she asked with a smile as she pulled out an old-fashioned piece of paper and a pen to take down his order. Greg pulled out his badge. "We're here with the Chicago PD and we'd like to speak to the manager. I'm CSI Banning and this is my boss, Lieutenant O'Malley." Kerry inclined her head. She had been looking around and decided that Greg needed this experience talking. "I'll get him for you," she said, still smiling, though now she seemed slightly nervous. "Thanks, Greg said instinctively, and watched as she walked back toward the kitchen. "Mr. Banning, do you see that?" Kerry pointed to the corner of the ceiling. Greg nodded. "Security camera," he said, spotting the hole in the wall. "Slightly advanced technology for a place that still uses paper and pens to take down orders." "Yeah," Greg said, "but I think the paper is for effect." The manager came out and put a big smile on his face for his special customers. Greg smiled back, but noticed that the customers around them had moved away slightly once they had mentioned that they were with the Chicago PD. "My name's Roy Mantinelli. Is it possible we could talk in the back room?" the manager asked. "The customers." "Of course," Kerry said. "We'll want to look around the entire diner anyway. Lead the way." The manager led them to the back room, and as soon as they were there, Kerry asked, "What can you tell us about a Mr. Joe Lorenz?" "Joe's a waiter here," he said immediately. "He started out last year as a busboy. I know he got out of jail and was on parole until last year. Listen, lieutenants, I'm not running a dirty business here. Everybody who works here is clean and honest, and works their shift and then goes home. I don't control what they do there, but they sure as hell don't do anything illegal here. I got a wife and kids," he said as he took out his phone and showed them a picture of his wife and 2 daughters. Then he put it back in his pocket and waited for them to answer. Kerry and Greg didn't bother correcting the man on the fact that they were not both lieutenants. "I'd like to know if Mr. Lorenz ever came in late or took an exceedingly long lunch break, anything out of the ordinary. I want to know exactly where Mr. Lorenz spent most of his day, and I'll need your security camera files." "Have you run into much security trouble, Mr. Mantinelli?" Greg added. The manager looked shocked. How did they know about the camera? We had a break-in about a year ago. I protect my employees. I bought the security cameras with the money I had left over last year. And of course you can see the footage. I've got a few security cameras around here and the footage covers all of them. As to Joe, he always shows up on time, works his shift, takes a lunch break, and is back on time. He leaves on time. He's a good worker. Today's been the only day he hasn't been in." "Did he call in sick?" Kerry asked. "No, he didn't. I was concerned. I tried his residence, but no one's answering." Kerry exchanged glances with Greg before saying, "We're going to need that address and number, and any contacts you might have dealing with him." "Has he done something wrong? Is he in trouble?" "I can't disclose that information, sir," Kerry said. "Just get me the numbers, the address, and the security recordings, please. CSI Banning and I are going to look around." Kerry went to leave as soon as the manager nodded, but Greg asked, before she could step out of the back room, "Mr. Mantinelli, did you report the break-in to the police?" "No," the manager said, shaking his head. "No, I didn't report it. Nothing was stolen. It was just that the door was open when I came back in. Some food had been cooked. Probably the kids around here wanting a good meal and a place to stay until morning. We open at 0600. Can't have been that long for 'em, since we close at midnight. But anyway." Greg suspected it wasn't children who broke in. It was probably a Diablo meeting that went down, since Lorenz offered a safe place for them to talk for 6 hours until someone came in. No one would think it unusual that a diner was open that late, and the door would be locked if anyone approached it. Kerry and Greg turned and walked out of the back room as the manager prepared their tapes and information. "Look for anything unusual. Try to blend in," Kerry instructed Greg, and he nodded. They separated. After a few moments of looking around, flashing their badges so that they could enter the kitchen, they reconvened outside the manager's office, and Kerry asked, "Find anything?" "Just the other 2 security cameras." "All right. Let's see if Mr. Mantinelli has our information," she said, and they entered the back room again. The manager handed them a memory disk. "It's got the footage and the paperwork regarding Joe's employment," he explained. "Thank you, Mr. Mantinelli. We'll be in touch if we need anything else," Greg said. "Should I not leave town or something like that?" he asked them. "Just don't lose your phone, and thank you for your help," Kerry said. "Anything I can do to help, and if Joe comes in, I'll give you guys a call." We would appreciate that. Make sure he doesn't leave if he does come in, Kerry told him. With that, they turned and left, Greg carrying the disc. We're going to pay Mr. Lorenz's residence a visit, Mr. Banning, she said, but her next thought was interrupted when her cell phone rang. She flipped it open immediately and asked the holographic image, Justin, what have you got? Got a license plate number after running it through the digital enhancement from the satellite image. It's a black SUV, and we're tracking it by drone. We lost it for a few minutes, but another drone picked it up again. We've got a hit. Where is it? Kerry asked, trying not to sound frantic. I'm sending your nav system the coordinates. It's off of Butterfield. Turn right onto Eola, then make another right. Barely paved road, follow it straight down. You'll get to a turnaround, and then the car is in a ditch right off of that. Satellites picked up another car meeting with that car, but didn't get a clear enough image to see if anything or anyone was transferred. The drones weren't able to follow the other car. They were using jammers. Got it, Kerry said, trying not to react to the news that their trail ended there. Thanks, Justin. Kerry and Greg jogged to the car, and Kerry lifted the car off the ground and hovered at top speed straight toward Butterfield. It was a 20-minute hover, and neither Greg nor Kerry spoke the entire way. Kerry called in for backup just in case someone was still in the car, but her GPS said it was stationary, and therefore it was unlikely someone was there. And if the car was met by another car, the trade-off had already taken place. They touched down on Eola, since no car was on Eola anyway, and sped off, driving way past the speed limit, onto the unnamed side road. The car kicked up dust behind it as it sped down the incredibly long, barely paved road. What seemed like an eternity later, but in reality was only a few minutes, Kerry and Greg arrived first on scene. Greg hopped out of the car and swung around back. He picked up both his and Kerry's CSI kits and handed hers to her. Thank you, she said with a nod, and they approached the unmoving vehicle. Kerry stopped about 3 meters away and put her CSI kit down. Just a safety precaution, Mr. Banning, she said quietly as she took out her weapon. He nodded, and they approached the car carefully. It wasn't until now that they saw the windows were tinted, and someone technically could be in there. The doors were unlocked, and a practiced entry showed them that it was indeed empty. Grab your kit, Greg, Kerry said, looking at the back seat, where she could see blood and a few red hairs. Greg brought both kits, since Kerry wasn't moving. She was simply staring at the blood in the back. Kerry, he said quietly, maybe you should take the front. I'll take the back. Kerry nodded slowly and took her kit from his hand. She peeled her eyes from the back seat and opened the front passenger door. Greg got started taking pictures, and then started swabbing for DNA. They would fingerprint the interior when it was back at the lab. For now, they needed to fingerprint the outside, and the parts that might easily be contaminated when they went to move it to their garage at the lab. Kerry fingerprinted the door handles, the steering wheel, the gear shift, and the interior and exterior mirrors. When Greg finished swabbing for DNA and collecting hairs, he started boot printing the floor of the car. He also checked the tires for unusual residue, and he checked the trunk. Nothing except duct tape was in the trunk, and the car was pretty vacant as well. Except, Kerry noticed something in the driver's seat. Mr. Banning, come here. She pointed to the seat once Greg was next to her. What do you see? Greg squinted in the sunlight to see the seat better and squatted down to get a better angle. There's a paper business card in here, he murmured, as he reached in and pulled the business card out of the crack in the seat. Must have fallen out of the driver's back pocket. It's a contractor's name and number, Cassidy Webster. Sells warehouse space. Now I wonder why our driver might be interested in that. Thank you, Greg. Bag it and process it back at the lab. We'll give Miss Webster a call later. Kerry looked up and saw through her sunglasses that the chopper was coming toward them with an anti-grav lift pad in tow. Looks like tow is here. Where the hell is backup? As if on cue, 2 squad cars sped down the road and parked on either side of the car they were sight processing. Armed officers got out and announced, reporting as ordered by Lieutenant O'Malley. Where were you? We already approached the vehicle and started processing, Kerry said as the chopper narrowed in on the position overhead. Greg, close her up and get her ready to ship. Greg nodded, and Kerry walked toward the officers. Well? We only just got your orders, ma'am, the officer said, confused. 2 minutes ago. Kerry raised an eyebrow. She was about to say something when she heard an all-too-familiar click and beep after Greg shut the door to the car. Her head spun, and she saw that Greg was next to the passenger side door, apparently wondering what he had heard as well. Greg, run! He knew Kerry well enough to know that tone. He didn't just run. He dove, and so did she, and the officers standing near her. The chopper wasn't so lucky. It hadn't heard the order, and in seconds, the detonation occurred. The blast was enormous, and Kerry covered her head with her hands, shoving herself to the ground. The clouds of fire engulfed the hovering chopper, and it ignited into a ball of red and black flames. Then its remains flew out of the explosion site, impacting into the ground and incinerating anything in their paths. One grazed Kerry's arm, and she felt the heat of one near her head, thankful it hadn't actually hit her. The smoke seemed to burn through her eyelids and sting her eyes. She held her breath until it was over, and then she rose carefully, understanding the glass would be everywhere. She immediately looked for Greg, and saw him lying on the ground nearby. She ran over to him and knelt next to him, ignoring her ringing ears and stinging eyes. She coughed violently through the smoke. "Greg?" He rolled over and groaned. "I'm okay," he said. "Can you get up?" "Yeah," he answered and propped himself up slowly. He had been hit with several shards of metal, and because he was closer to the blast site, he was mildly burned, but otherwise, okay. "You need to get to the hospital and get treatment. You'll get an infection," she told him. "Are you sure you can get up?" "Yeah, I'm okay," he assured her. "We need to move out of here. Let's go," she said, and slung his glass-laden arm around her shoulder as they staggered out of the blast zone and dropped to the dirt. "I'm gonna call a medic. Stay put," she ordered, and pulled out her cell phone. She was starting to be able to hear herself better, and now outside of the smoke, she could breathe easier. She coughed again, expelling the pollutants from her lungs. She looked around for the officers and saw them stagger out of the blast zone, unharmed. They took cover behind their squad cars. "Rescue's on its way," she said as she put the phone away after texting the information in. "You guys okay over there?" she called to the officers, but raising her voice expelled another cough. "We're fine, ma'am," the highest-ranking officer told her. They approached Kerry and Greg. "Are you two okay?" "We're fine," Kerry said. "Greg needs some medical attention, but he'll be okay." She looked over to the smoldering frame of the car, which was now burning steadily but no longer exploding, thank God. The officer motioned to his men to go ahead and put out the flames. They had flame retardant in the squad cars. There was no reason why the car should have to keep burning. "We lost the business card and the fingerprints," Greg said from his sitting position. Their CSI kits had been caught in the blast. Thankfully, Greg wasn't inexperienced enough to jump in with something heavy in his hand and had dropped the kit before he dove. "That bomb was meant to kill us, and it did kill the helicopter pilot and his co-pilot," Kerry said grimly, looking at the crashed frame of the combusted helicopter. There couldn't be survivors, because the unaffected police officers were not engaged in rescue, but instead were standing around the wreckage, looking at their pads, which would have showed life signs if there had been any. They began to take pictures. "Let's just be thankful we didn't all lose our lives. We can still work off of Cassidy Webster's name. Contractor for warehouses. We'll look her up." "Why go through all the trouble of setting a bomb that only goes off when the door is closed for a second time, and then leave a business card behind?" Kerry asked her CSI. Greg thought for a moment. "So that we call Cassidy Webster and alert them as to whether we're alive or not?" "This is going to be all over the news. They'll probably know if we're alive or not. But if we called Cassidy Webster and paid her a visit, they might just find out exactly how far along we are in the case. We'd better hold off on Cassidy's number, at least for now. We still have to go to Lorenz's residence." "I'll be fine to go with you on that interview," he said. "Just a few cuts and scrapes." "We'll see what the medic says," Kerry told him firmly. "I just called in. Cleanup will be here in a few minutes," the officer yelled to her. "Good. We won't have to stick around. If they find anything that might resemble evidence, tell them to send it directly to the crime lab," Kerry ordered, and then turned to Greg. "I'm going to have a look at the door. See if we can spot the type of bomb they had installed. Obviously mechanical detonation. Greg, you'll be okay here?" "I can help you," Greg said, moving to get up. "No, stay down. I don't want anything sinking further in and you having to go to the hospital to get it out," she said with a frown. "Stay put." Greg reluctantly complied and watched his boss walk toward the wreckage. He had to resist the urge to tell her to be careful. A nearby officer looked at him and asked, "She's a bomb expert too?" "She spent 3 years on the Dublin bomb squad, from what I understand," he told the officer, "and she apparently was very good at it while she was there." The officer nodded. He looked back to where his officers were securing the site with holographic tape, and he saw the medics pulling up. Right behind them were the news vans. "Great. I'm going to have metal pulled out of my ass on the local news," Greg muttered. "I'll see what I can do about holding them off," the officer told him, and turned away to meet the news trucks. The medics pulled up next to Greg, and 2 paramedics jumped out of the still hovering vehicle and hurried over to him. "I'm fine," he protested as they insisted on lifting him onto the anti-grav stretcher before treating him. As that took place, Kerry discovered the source of the explosion, and grimaced when she saw that the metal encasement of the very small quantity of explosives in the car looked to be the same type of metal alloy that encased Derek's bombs. She couldn't help but jump to the conclusion that they interfered with the transmission from dispatch to the officers as well, and that was why they were nearly 15 minutes late. Kerry could understand why they didn't see the bomb in the first place now. It was deep in the locking mechanism of the car door, and they were looking for evidence in places people tended to touch. They weren't looking for bombs, but they had fallen for bait, and to say that it annoyed her would be an understatement. But why delay the officers? Why not kill as many people as possible? Kerry shook her head. It could be any number of reasons. They could have only been targeting her. They weren't terrorists, they were just out for money, and Chicago CSI was getting in their way. They might have thought that more than 2 pairs of eyes might be more likely to pick up on the blast cap detonator that clicked as soon as the door was shut for a second time. Or worse yet, find the time delay device that happened to be orange and was hidden behind the blast cap. The bomb was well rigged, and already in the car when it was parked. It obviously was activated after they left the car, or Connor would have been blown up as they took him away. Kerry looked behind her, seeing that Greg was now receiving medical treatment. She had inspected all she could here. She would need the crime lab to find anything else in the remnants. The car was just too destroyed. She turned and walked over to where Greg was. "How's he doing?" she asked the medic. "He'll be fine, ma'am. He does need stitches and burn treatment, but we can do that here if you need him back," the medic answered with a smile. "What am I, an object?" Greg asked jokingly, attempting to lighten the mood. "Need him back," he muttered. Kerry smiled slightly. "I do indeed need him back," she said. "We've got 2 fatalities," she informed the medic, sobering a bit. "The pilot and the co-pilot in the helicopter. There aren't any survivors." "I can see that," the medic answered grimly, looking at the wreckage. He looked at Kerry. "You need medical attention too, ma'am. That arm's bleeding and you've got some flash burns." Another medic came over, overhearing the conversation. "I can take care of that," she told her. Kerry looked hesitantly at Greg, wondering if he wanted her to hear. "Go ahead, boss, I'm fine," said Greg. He smiled for good measure, and then the medic pulled out another piece of broken glass from his arm, and he winced. "Don't have too much fun without me," Kerry said without a smile as she went with the medic. "You don't have to worry about that," Greg called after her, and winced again as another piece of glass was pulled. "You're lucky," Greg's medic said. "It could have been much worse. Covering your head probably saved your life." "I just ran and dove. Lost evidence. My ears are still ringing. Is that normal?" "It should stop in about an hour or so. If it doesn't, call your doctor or go to a hospital. They'll look into it." Greg nodded. While the medic taking care of Kerry attempted to stitch her arm, Kerry spoke to Justin. She had the phone to her ear so the medic couldn't hear what he said. "So I need you to look up who was piloting the helicopter. Inform their families, okay?" "I'll take care of it," Justin said on the other side. His tone suggested that he definitely wasn't looking forward to the job. "I'm heading to Lorenz's residence from here." "Are you sure you're up to it? I can go with Nikki or Sarah." "We're fine here," Kerry said quickly. Greg's receiving medical treatment as we speak, and I'll wait till that's done. That'll give Nikki time to get here so that we can take off. Keep Sarah with the boys unless you need her. Then make sure someone else is with them. Spencer, if he doesn't have too much to do." "Okay, will do. Want me to run Cassidy Webster's name through a search?" "Go ahead, but be careful. Make sure you cover your tracks and don't let anyone, not even people on our own servers, get a record of your search," Kerry said. "And as soon as it gets back to the lab, process the car." "All right. Do you need Hans over there?" Kerry looked around the crash site. "This bomb incinerates almost everything in its path. The frame of the car barely survived." "Not much survived except parts of the bomb itself." "I don't think we need an ME, but if Hans isn't busy, send him over." Like Hans wasn't busy. This was just about the busiest the crime lab got. "Okay," Justin said. "Anderson says he's found some more information that you should see about Tajada when you get back from Lorenz's residence." "Got it. Anything that'll help with the Diablo?" "Maybe. He says he'd rather show you." "All right," Kerry said, puzzled. What couldn't be said over the secure phone transmission? "Anything else you managed to pull up?" "No, not much. Your lead on Lorenz's residence is about the strongest thing we're looking at right now." Kerry nodded. "All right, keep me posted on what's going on at your end." "I will. Call me if you need me. And for God's sake, Kerry, wait for backup." "Don't worry," she said with a smile. "I'll wait. even if I'm waiting for 15 minutes. Why would you wait that long? Justin asked, concerned. It's how long I waited here. I think our radios are being listened to. If you can, stay on the phone, not the radio. You do the same, he said. I'll look into it. Be careful, Kerry. If these people were in their system, listening to their secure radio transmissions and posing as officers, then there was almost no end to the damage they could do. There was someone on the inside working for them, and Justin intended to find out who. I will. And Justin? Yeah? There are no other cases in Chicago, unless they're connected to this one. Understood? All right, he said. I'll talk to you later. Kerry placed the phone in her pocket and looked at the medic. Are you almost done? She asked irritably. Just about, Lieutenant. Sorry, he said, placing tape on the liquid stitching so she didn't pull it open. You're going to have to try not to yank this, he warned. I understand you're busy, but if you can try to take it easy for the next couple days, it'll be better for this. It's quite a gash, and you had some flash burns, too. It'll be okay, she said immediately, and taking it easy isn't an option right now. Give me a few days, and then we'll talk. He just about rolled his eyes, but was able to resist the urge. Doctors, pilots, and cops, he thought in mild amusement. We'll read more tomorrow.